And with that, Rasmus, I think we'll slowly get started here. A couple of items. Great to see everybody. There's a QA section on the right-hand side that we encourage you to use to ask us any questions as we go. We don't promise that we can answer them all, but we will give it our best and at least give our perspective on the questions coming in. This is a very exciting topic. Rasmus and I spend probably most of our time discussing this in our day-to-day work, but we'll kind of go through some of that here, hopefully be able to give you something to take away from this session and bring back to your teams. We will try to keep this as interactive as possible. So you'll actually notice that we have come up with a decent amount of polls that we'll try to run here during the session so that you all can learn more about each other and what everybody else is doing as it relates to using AI or the risks of using AI or which direction the industry is going in. So we're excited to have those polls run as we go through the webinar and encourage everybody to share views, examples, opinions in the chat or ask us a question using the Q&A tab. So with that, I will get us started. The agenda for us today is a relatively short and sweet, but I anticipate we'll have a lot of good discussions on the way. So we'll try to give some background on what is AI actually for clinical operations, specifically looking at medical devices and medical device clinical operations, and looking a little bit back on, it's actually not really started now. Now it's getting traction, but I'll come back to that here in a moment. And then we'll talk about it's not really coming, it's already here, and what we're seeing, and even some inspirational examples and detailed use cases that we've been able to gather from our customers and peers and people that we talk to in our day-to-day work. And then we'll dive into some of the limitations. It's not perfect by no means, and there's a lot of risk associated. And how do we mitigate and manage and navigate the compliance part of it, and which regulations are already there and in use and in effect, and which might be coming. And then we'll actually show an example of an approach, a prototype that we've made and we're using in Greenlight Guru Clinical, which is the electronic data capture platform that we provide to the market, and how we're actually leveraging some of the latest technologies in using AI in the market. Just quickly about me, and Rasmus, I'll give you a moment here to present yourself. My name is Paul. I have been in the e-clinical space for the better part of the last 13 or 14 years by now. I've been at Greenlight Guru since 2022. I'm the executive vice president for our European business as well as our clinical product, and working on a day-to-day, again, focused on the e-clinical space, but also in general on growing Greenlight Guru in Europe. And Rasmus, I'll let you present yourself here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rasmus. I am the product manager for Greenlight Guru Clinical. I have been so since 2022 and have also been within the space and with Pall for the better part of 9.5 years. Very excited to get into this discussion.
Excellent. Thank you. And with that, I will actually launch our first poll. So when I press open poll on the right-hand side, you can see there's a polls tab. Please use that to vote for the poll. We're going to share the results as we go here, but we'd love to know more about your role in clinical operations so that we kind of get a sense of who's in the room, what's the distribution like. So on the right-hand side of the webinar, you'll see a polls tab where you can vote with your role. And then here very shortly we'll give it 30 seconds or so, we'll share the results of this, of the vote and kind of how people are stacking up. Let's give it one more moment here. Stop sharing this and start sharing this. So you will see here as the votes start coming in that there is a big portion of sponsors. There are monitors, data entry personnel not in the room at the moment. There's a lot of others and some that do not work in clinical operations day to day. Excellent, very exciting. So a big weight of sponsors and other roles in the room. And with that, I'm actually going to open one more poll, the one on the right-hand side. I'm going to close the first one. Thank you all for voting. I'm going to do a quick second round here with how frequently does everybody that's already here use AI in their day-to-day work. Excited to see that, and going to share this as well. So as you'll see, there's plenty of people that are using it multiple times a day, and obviously some on the never wagon, but a big portion of you, a big weight of everybody is on the far right hand of this of the poll, meaning a lot of usage, either once a week, once a day, and kind of multiple times a day is still in the lead. Very interesting, and thank you all for sharing that. I'm going to just stop sharing this poll real quick and get back to this slideshow. And with that, just going to cover some of the background. I'll leave the poll open, so if you still want to vote on the poll, the one for frequency, that would be great. And here shortly, I might actually open the next one so you can vote while we are speaking as well. So rough history, kind of, this is our perspective. As we discussed it, what are the different phases of AI in clinical operations? So it's obviously while the last 12 months, specifically even the last 6 months, have seen an enormous growth and an enormous speed of development as it relates to specifically the large language models more so than anything else. We've actually seen and used what is underneath AI. Some of the mathematical basis of artificial intelligence has actually been used pretty early on in clinical operations for MedTech, but also in pharmaceutical studies. So if we go back to what I chose to call phase one, and this is probably somewhere in the 90s, going into the 2000s, the statistical computing that was being used at the time to do statistical modeling and try to start predicting results of clinical studies was probably what I would call phase one. And phase two was then probably later into the late 2000s, early 2010s. And that's when we started seeing this big data movement. There's probably a lot of people here in the room that remember the time when big data was a whole thing. And obviously cloud computing started it. But then the whole big data movement of having big data sets, being able to process big data sets, needing the computing power to actually analyze big data sets and using those to do standard regression analysis. That's probably, if I go back to some of the really early days of building out our EDC, we were seeing a lot of people trying to use standard regression analysis to predict outcomes and even to do risk-based monitoring to figure out what is the risk in the study, where are we seeing outliers, and so on. I would probably call that phase two, which was the foundation of what we're seeing today. And then I'll call the current phase three, which is a lot more adoption, a lot more people are using it. The technology is a lot more accessible, so it's not restricted to massive data sets or having massive data sets. It's actually a lot more available. And the large language models that we see day to day have given everybody probably more accessibility to the technology that's underneath running some of these models, if you like. And we'll actually come back to some examples of what we're seeing here in just a moment. But I'd probably call those the three phases. So while it's new to kind of the current market, if you like, it's not really new. We've seen the approach of trying to do statistical modeling for years and years here in our industry. And when we then, and I'll kind of let you chime in here, Rasmus, in a moment, when we look at the value of AI in clinical operations, me and Rasmus have discussed this for a long time. And we, in our discussions, always end up boiling it down to two things. And with that, Rasmus, why don't you take us through those and the aspects of that?
Yeah, so it derived from our discussion of what is the value of AI within clinical operations. And we fairly fast got to the agreement, if you like, that quality and speed are the absolute biggest value drivers of utilizing AI within clinical operations. Speed should be seen in the context of how do you, as a single person, for instance, a single monitor or a single data manager, how do you become able to manage your study more easily, faster, being able to go through vast quantities of data more easily. How can you, for instance, scale from being able to manage 1 or 2 studies to maybe 3 and 4 or 5? That is the big drive we are looking to see, while of course not sacrificing quality. At no point would you want to gain speed but lose quality. The absolute gold is in your data and the quality of your data, so that should be paramount. Don't want to see a dip in quality for an exchange in speed.
Totally agree. And when we look at the quality is so many things. So it's the quality of the data, the quality of your work, and the quality of, I'm going to call it patient experience as well. And so when we've discussed the experience of everybody in a study, I think AI will have the potential to affect the quality of that experience across the board. And we can discuss that probably at length as well. Now, we then did a brainstorm and said, where potentially could AI start getting used as it relates to clinical operations on medical device studies? And while this list is by no means meant to be exhaustive, it's meant to be inspirational. Rasmus, I'll let you kind of start taking us through it, and I'll chime in here in a moment. But we kind of broke it down to 3 phases. So like before a study, during a study, and after a study, and we'll be going through all those 3 here. But Rasmus, back to you.
Yeah, so the pre-study activities are likely the ones where you here today have already started moving into, because these are the ones accessible outside of, for instance, an EDC system. This is where you can start leveraging custom GPTs from ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whichever large language model that you're utilizing. And that can be to inform you on protocol designs. How do you design CRFs? What are some common things that you might want to actually be collecting in terms of endpoints? Here, it's of course important that you always keep your experience and pedigree in mind and not entirely relying on these models. It can brainstorm statistical analysis plans, potentially make your recruitment material even more enticing, thereby allowing you to fetch more patients if you're recruiting them from online ads or similar. It's a lot about being able to reduce the time it takes to generate documentation as well. How can we actually make use of these language models to not only brainstorm a protocol, but from the protocol, generate all the subsequent documents that are needed as part of your clinical trial?
And then, during a study, this becomes a little bit more tactical. And Rasmus, I'll let you chime in here. But as we've discussed this a lot, this is not only about the technology. It's not about the system that you use in a study to collect the data, or the clinical trial management system you use, or the eTMF system you use necessarily for that sake. But it's probably more about what are the potentials even today in the current the technology, with the technology that's currently available to us.
Yeah, and it's especially during this part of the study where Pall and I see the potential biggest value in terms of where can we actually find speed in terms of tasks that can be more automated or reduced in terms of time it takes to perform them. And data collection. We have also spoken to some of our clients. They can see a big upside in, for instance, uploading source documents and then being able, then having an AI scan these pages and automatically transfer the data, ideally saving some time from transcribing. Naturally, it won't be perfect, but if it can get you 80% of the way there, and then you review and correct, already big time savings. But these, for instance, monitoring, cleaning, and data collection are also quite centered around the EDC systems themselves. And there you more or less rely on the EDC system to have these components within them. Or you would need to extract data, apply your AI cleaning, and then mirror that in the EDC system. But it's definitely within this section, while it is also the more tricky one, because here you also start actually closely looking at the data, and some more concerns comes close as well. Post-study
Excellent.
is, here there are different approaches to how you might go about using AI within statistical analysis. Guidance from EMA, now slightly more in the medical space, but likely to also reflect on the MedTech space eventually, is that if you're using a model as part of your analysis, you need to freeze it and have all the validation documents in place showing how it works and essentially proving that if you continuously put the same thing in, you get the same thing out. Where we are seeing it more used today is to assist with generating the scripts that you need to analyze the data. So you can faster get the scripts working and in order for instance, your interim analysis. So you can actually preload a lot of the work ahead of time instead of saving all that for the end.
Absolutely. And with that, I've actually already launched the next poll. You can see it again on the right-hand side. And I encourage everybody use that and also use the Q&A section if you have any questions for Rasmus or myself. The first one we launched is where do the people in the room see the biggest potential for AI? And we are already seeing some of the responses come in. Let me just stop sharing and share that back with you here. So pretty equal. That is a very interesting thing. Rasmus and I have obviously discussed that as well. Interestingly, right now, I think most people that we talk to are using it prior to launching the study, and then probably not as much during or post. I think the potential personally is going to be equal across the board. And so I was kind of obviously excited to see that somewhat shake out in the data, although pre is definitely the one safely in the lead at the moment. But that's a very interesting topic of discussion, and obviously something that we're paying close attention to here at Greenlight Guru. And with that, I'm going to launch the second one real quick and see where the group thinks the most prominent benefit will come from. And that's across the two items that we discussed earlier. So when we look at it, it is the quality benefits and then the cost or the time saving aspects, the speed. And this is very interesting where speed is clearly where at least this group sees the most potential by a big amount. So that's a very interesting aspect, and something that, again, as we think about our even product development, how do we play a role in ensuring that we leverage this technology to achieve speed? So thank you all for participating there. And just going back to the deck here real quick. And with that, we'll go into some use cases. And maybe I'll just kind of give the basic considerations. And then, Rasmus, you can go into more detail and some of these examples you were just going through. Basic considerations that we have found, and this is just kind of general guidance. There's nothing magical in this, but a big encouragement for us from our side is that most of the large language models, if not all, probably all at this point, but most of them at least, offer a professional version, meaning you can buy an enterprise version of an LLM. This could be, again, Gemini or ChatGPT or any of the other models that are available out there, that you can then make sure that the data you are having it process for you is not used to train the model. That's number one. But you can also get a better understanding of where the data is being processed. Now, the Europeans in the room will probably think about the things like during a study, can I put my data in here? And obviously, a big consideration there is where's the data being processed? You need to make sure that you are complying with the Data Protection Act in Europe while still trying to leverage some of these technologies. So that's just try to make sure that you know exactly where the solution that you're using is hosted so that you can actually share somewhat with it. But there might still be data that you have no problem with training the model on. So you can kind of pick your model, train it on your content. And what that means is you can actually create an agent. And this is a pretty easy thing. And if you don't know how to do it, I would encourage you to ask the AI how to do it. And it will actually walk you through it in a step-by-step. It's pretty easy. But you can actually train it, for example, and Rasmus, I'll let you kind of talk through the examples, but you can train it on whatever you have. This could be, scientific articles. This could be other publications. This could be internal quality management documents. This could be anything that is a written text or videos for that sake, and train the model on it so that it has your business context when it's doing work for you. So make sure that also, like I kind of made the point of, make sure you understand the settings, but a big encouragement from us, and this is something we're already seeing our customers do, is they're creating their own agents with their own data and then leveraging that to some of the examples here down below. And Rasmus, I'll pass it to you to kind of talk us through these 4 examples that we've picked for today.
Yeah. Giving context to your agent is absolutely key. And that does mean you'll need to feed it your existing protocols, for instance. It needs to learn what you value in a protocol. Similarly, what we have done internally when using AIs is generate a sort of master prompt, which sets the stage. And this is what you basically do with these agents in ChatGPT, for instance. You give it some context, but then also some, let's call it, dedicated behavior, thereby tailoring it more and more, for instance, for your protocol writing. Here it is, of course, slightly lopsided in terms of, if you are a large company with lots of trials under your belt, you will have lots more data to feed into it that it can then learn from and extend upon. Smaller or newer companies are at a bit of a disadvantage there, but there might be protocols, or at least synopsis, that you can find on ClinicalTrials.gov or similar that you can use to feed it for them to learn on. But it is fairly important that you feed it and then lock it in. CRF design can potentially be inferred from the protocol, assuming that you have at least listed out the endpoints quite nicely. And there it can lean on the vast knowledge it's been trained on in terms of how might you structure your data collection, because there is a lot of info readily available online for that, and partly also from companies like ours.
Maybe one more thing, sorry, Rasmus, on the CRF design that we've actually seen some try to start doing is that your competitors, if you don't have this yourself, they might have scientific publications as well with their primary endpoints kind of very clearly laid out in them and how they performed. So one thing that if you train, again, your own model, and you even, let's say you used an EDC such as ours, you created your study, you created the CRF, you can pull that out typically in different formats, feed it back to the model, give it the context of what your competitors are doing, and ask it what you're missing. So while it wouldn't not write it for you, it's not creating it from scratch, it can give you feedback as an expert, because you might have created the expert in the agent through using publicly available information that you can kind of leverage to make sure that you get the most value from the LLM. So sorry, just to kind of add one more example there.
Yeah, and to your point there as well, not all LLMs are equally good at various things. So it can be you need to, let's call it, shop around to see which might be most beneficial in terms of delivering what you are looking for. Recruitment and advice and guidance. That's again here I wouldn't say you necessarily need to train it. That's more where you can use it as a sparring partner. You use it to bounce ideas off, and here you can also prompt the LLM to be critical. And that's actually a very important thing. Never forget that LLMs have been created to keep your attention and to continuously validate you and have you continue to interact with it. That's why you need to specifically have it be critical. You can, for instance, prompt it to say, you are now a patient of this type, living in this region with this sort of beliefs. You might be skeptical about something. I want you to evaluate this draft I have of a recruitment page. And then based upon that sort of feedback, you can start tweaking the recruitment information. So not only have it create a first draft, use it to critically look at what you've made. And thereby, I've also seen examples of where you essentially have two chats going. One as the generator of this recruitment advice or guidance, and then a second one being the devil's advocate. And then you're bouncing the output from one to the other, seeing ideally that it continuously improve on the writing. One thing to note when you get an output you want to present to patients, do change up the writing that it produces. AI have sort of converged into a certain style where it talks in very sharp points. It utilizes what's called M dashes, like very long dashed lines, and very short sentences that are very sort of, think about this. This is the one thing you need to take away. And it makes it read very machine-ish, which is not enticing to anyone really. The more AI slop that is generated and spread around the internet, the more fake it can look and basically look like phishing. Yeah, it was a small thing to consider there as well. Data trends is especially where you want to be sure that you are on a pro license or similar, and you have really considered the data processing of the GPT or whatever you're using, because here you are basically handing over your company gold, and yeah, be slightly worried about that. In general, I would rather use, you can use it to like peruse the data you have if you just want to look for overall trends, but always ask it to show the calculations or the sources or like what it's referring to. So if you're asking it to summarize over a decent sized data set and it gives you a figure or a table, then ask it to pull out, for instance, all the subjects that have actually answered this particular thing and give you it in a dedicated list so you can double check it. So that's the same thing. Double check whatever it does. They will hallucinate, they will lie, That's again because they are put in the world to keep you engaged and to not say, I cannot do that. That's the fundamental thing if you are accessing a ChatGPT, for instance.
But also to back to the point that you made earlier, a lot of the people that we talk to are actually not using it to do the analysis, but to come up with the script for the analysis, or to guide you in how do you write this script in Excel or in R or in SAS or in any other statistical analysis tool, or how do you create a dashboard for this in Power BI? So you can actually use the LLM to produce some of the foundational work that you can then go with doing. All right, and with that we will move on to the next two polls and the last two polls for today. So the first one I'll open here. So which part of the study is the group here most confident in using AI? And the second poll that I will open here shortly is then about what are you most concerned about? So what is the group concerned about? And I will share the results of the poll here. And it is clear that pre-study is giving people more confidence than the rest. And this is also back to the point I was making earlier. This is what we are seeing in our conversations with people in the market. We are seeing that people are using the LLMs and the technology that's available to us now to a large extent prior to a study, more so than during or after a study. So thank you all for sharing that. And just going to switch to the next one. And that is the one about concern. So what is this group concerned about when using AI? And then we'll move on to talk about compliance here very shortly. Privacy, safety, and reliability. So being able to ensure that it's safe, some of the elements that we've discussed here so far. So again, very aligns very well with the people that we talk to. There's kind of, in some organizations, it's not even allowed. If we just start there, there are organizations still in our industry that just say there will be no usage of any LLM internally. And then there are others that are a little bit more aggressive. But the privacy, safety, reliability, and validation is definitely the three things that we're also seeing. So thank you all for engaging with us in that. And I will stop sharing this again and move to this slide deck and hand it back to you, Rasmus.
Yes, so moving into limitation, risk, and compliance within clinical operations. We have formulated some questions that, for instance, take a screenshot of this or similar, that you can ask yourself prior to adopting an AI, both let's call it a generic like ChatGPT, or prior to adopting an AI built into a system provider's system. Partly it's privacy and safety related, of course. So where is your data being sent? Where does the model live? Is it a quote unquote live model? Are you sending data directly to OpenAI? Or does it live within, for instance, the system vendor's environment? Or similarly, are you creating an internal one? The second point is partly related to some grim examples that have surfaced on LinkedIn, where you, via prompt injection or similar, have been able to get around safety measures put in to the AI, and thereby having it give you things it was not supposed to. This have been seen, for instance, with a prompt saying, ignore all previous prompts and instructions, and then do this new thing that you're actually not allowed to do. So very relevant question, asking how and what have a provider done to minimize the issue of that prompt injection. Hallucinations ties directly back to the most or second most, let's just go see, answered option. The most answered option in the last poll, reliability concerns. Because, yeah, that is the interesting one. How do you ensure whenever you put something in, you get the same result out when you put in the same thing? How do you ensure that it doesn't start making things up when it is inherently in its nature? As Olivia says in the chat, they are literally designed to always provide you with an answer. So it will start essentially bullshitting and double down on it, even when you catch it in a lie. Explainability relates a lot to audit. We have not heard a whole lot of info from audits just yet, but it is sure to come as adoption increases across clinical operations. And there, a key thing will always be transparency. They will want to know everything about how it's been trained, but also you need to be able to explain it. If you're using it, you need to be able to explain it. What is happening? Black box AIs can more or less only be allowed in cases where open or explainable models are drastically less efficient or effective. And then consider risk in terms of what actions are actually available to be performed with the AI. And then consider what you would assign the risk level to be and match that up against a system provider, because they might have a radically different idea compared to you, because they're trying to essentially move faster. And the last one, accountability. This ties back to good old GCP. You need to be able to attribute any action to someone. I doubt we are at a place where an auditor will accept the answer, the computer told me to do it, as a valid one. It always needs to be attributed to a person. This is what is also referred to human in the loop.
Absolutely. And with that, sorry, just gonna move us to the next one.
EU AI Act, of course, mainly if you are based within EU. The murmurs we're hearing is that actions done by AI in relation to clinical trials might be classified as high risk, meaning that additional requirements will be put on anyone using it. That's naturally where a good collaboration between sponsor and vendors needs to be in place to ensure we can meet these requirements. But ISO 42001 is a guidance or certification rather on management of AI within a quality management system. I have pulled out a little blurb in the first point. So it's not only for people who develop or provide services using AI, it's also for ones using AI-based products. So if you as an organization are looking to leverage AI heavily, it can definitely be worth looking into this particular ISO standard to ensure that you have a management system that accommodates for using AI and have a structured approach to how you're using it, and routinely reviews what you're doing and ensuring that it continuously improves.
Absolutely. And I just to kind of echo that one more time, as an organization ourselves, and we work in the quality management space, obviously, as well, for those that don't know us, but standards like these help us mitigate some of the risks we've mentioned above. So it helps us navigate the processes that we need to put in place and make sure that we can standardize and structure the work we do and ensure that we don't leave ourselves exposed either from a compliance perspective, data privacy perspective, or basically any other items that kind of could slip. So strongly encourage everybody that is either, to Rasmus's point, looking to build, develop, provide services around, or use AI to look into the ISO 42001 standard. All right, and then here, as we'll be rounding us out here in a couple of minutes, and obviously we'll leave some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, Q&A section is on the right. Strongly encourage you to use them. Ask us some questions. But before we do so, we're going to show you some of the early approaches that we've taken, and even a video of a prototype here in just a moment. But Rasmus, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, we approach it from the, let's call it the cautious side, with a focus on providing value in terms of speed. How do you get stuff done faster? So our AI should more be seen as a, for lack of a better word, a butler. You're asking the butler for something, and then the butler figures out what you're looking for and then suggests something. Then asking you to confirm the action, thereby attributing you performing the action as the one doing it. So human in the loop always. And then the actions available to you are strictly limited to the permission level. So we will always ensure that someone is not able to do more than they are allowed to, just by going via the AI instead of regular user actions. We're then starting with low risk. Low risk in this case meaning not looking at generated data. Easily reversible is another key point for being low risk, in that there's nothing, let's call it permanent. I think we can go to the video.
Yeah. Excellent. And I'm just gonna, before I press play here, give everybody a very short context of what you'll be seeing. So for those that don't know, Greenlight Guru and kind of the software solutions that we provide to the medical device industry, we have kind of two main offerings: a quality management system and then an eClinical suite. The eClinical suite is what we'll be seeing here, and just one example of how we have leveraged some of the latest technology in our platform as a point of inspiration. And so they kind of, for those that don't know it, eClinical platform that facilitates the compliance and collection of clinical evidence throughout the whole life cycle of any medical device, from the early stages of first in human studies through pivotal clinical trials, randomized controlled trials, and so on, and into the post-market clinical follow-up elements. So that's just kind of the picture of what you'll be seeing. But with that, I'm just going to play you this short example. And Rasmus, you can talk us through it.
So we have this is in beta, accessing it via two methods: keyboard command or the button. You in prose text write what you're looking for. The AI interprets and throws back to you, is this what you're looking to do? So you can actually review and confirm. You can see now 4 data events were unlocked. Similarly, it's also able to understand that you're not trying to log everything, you're logging some specific items, not even denoting exactly which start event or visit it is, but just the first two one. Always showing you what it wants to do. And then you can see log icons appeared. The last bit is more of a fun side effect. We found that it is also fluent in German, for instance, or Spanish. So you can access it very easily in other languages, still understands exactly what's meant to happen, can be beneficial. For instance, if we move towards more site personnel orientated items, where they will be able to do it in their local language instead of having to rely on English.
Absolutely. And just kind of for context, the reason this can be beneficial is that when you have a big study with hundreds of patients and maybe dozens of sites, managing some of these bulk actions in the past might have been a tedious task. So now we can actually use the LLM to parse the request and create the action that is then confirmed by the user. So again, there's always the human in the loop. We're taking some of the work away from them of having to do multiple actions and clicks. So again, a small example, but a real one, and that we have in our system. And obviously, as we go about identifying more opportunity, we'll keep adding those as we go. But with that said, we are coming up very close to the last 13 minutes of the scheduled time. And if there are any questions, please throw them into the chat. And I will start picking out some of them. So thank you for everybody that has already put questions in. The first one here from Johannes and Rasmus, while we might not have the exact answer to this, we can debate it. The auditor that they have here frequently asked the validation of the software being used. And this is back to the kind of the risk element, the point that you made before. So this is a statement and not a question, obviously. But what have we seen there?
Might be a response to Autumn's question.
Okay, great. So let's, I'll read Autumn's question first so that everybody has that context. So Autumn asked, she'd be interested to know what they need to document for audit purposes and what and how they're using AI for clinical research purposes. She points out that she thinks it would be strange to document that they're using Claude to proofread, check the different documents for consistency, etc., and not to document that I'm using Word to do the proofreading and checking the various different versions of documents for consistency. So Rasmus,
I believe that's
what do you think?
Replied with, they are just frequently asking to validate of use software.
Yeah.
I think it is an interesting one because, where do you actually draw the line? In principle, all systems, if I recall correctly, in ISO 14155, used as part of document generation or record generation are liable to be validated. But exactly where you draw the line is likely it will depend on your auditor and how strictly they interpret the rules. But would be very curious to hear more from anyone in the audience.
And I can share just a short perspective there is that, as you know, we've been doing this for years and years, and the scrutiny on the EDC, so the database itself, and the validation of that database has started to increase, and specifically increased quite a lot with the rollout of the MDR and the PMCF requirements. And my anticipation, and this is through early discussions with regulators and auditors in our industry, my anticipation is that the adoption of AI technology or AI-based technology in clinical operations will further increase the scrutiny. So again, back to the point that we were making before of traceability and validation, you need to be able to safely, obviously, both document, but also easily show how was this data generated. And if a data point was, if a query was resolved and there was no human in the loop, how did you validate that the query initiation process, whether that's done by a software script or a technology, or by a human, how did you ensure that was validated? Robert is sharing a great point in the chat from an auditor's perspective. So I encourage everybody to go look at that. If there's any other question from the group, feel free to let me know. Looking at the chat here, Peter is sharing a great perspective as well. I think with that, I will round us out here, close us out 8 minutes early. So first of all, thank you everybody for joining. This session will be available on demand. If you would like to see more content from Greenlight Guru, I encourage you to scan the QR code on the screen and follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we share all of these items. I will launch a survey here very shortly to get your feedback on this webinar. We really appreciate all the engagement we've had in the chat, in the Q&A. You can find both me and Rasmus on LinkedIn if you'd like to ask us more questions or connect with us. It was great to see you all. And with that, I'll wish everybody a great rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you all.